see his frame, you don't expect the ball to jump out of his hand, to detonate out of his hand, really, like it does. So he has that. And then the dual threat element with it, the athleticism and the vision as a runner in conjunction with that arm strength. I think that's what makes him a really dangerous prospect.
Who do you think is the number one quarterback going into the draft?
So I do have Malik Willis as QB1, but I like Corral a lot. He's my QB2. Okay. I have him way ahead of Pickett, for instance.
Describe the gap between Willis and Corral for you.
For me, it's just tools, right? Like, Malik Willis is coming into the league. I consider his tools analogous to a right-handed Michael Vick. He has certain tools that, when he's on, he's sort of an unbeatable player. He's a trump card in and of itself. Corral, just a little bit below that in terms of ceiling, but just the overall ceiling. But I'm pretty confident that Matt Corral is going to transition effectively to the NFL because of that skill set we're talking about.
All right. So interesting. Willis. So do you believe Willis goes in the top? Do you think Willis and Pickett? Walk me through where you think they go in the first round within, 5 or 6 spots.
So, I mean, Willis is definitely going in the top 10. I think that there's a real shot he goes number 2 to the Lions. I think if he doesn't, he's probably going to the Panthers. I didn't think beforehand that the Panthers would be in on him, but I've seen enough reports now that they have a first-round grade on Willis that they might be letting the cat out of the bag with that. Before I just would have assumed that they would have taken Kenny Pickett over Willis because of Matt Rule's history with Kenny Pickett. Obviously, Kenny Pickett was back in the day, was committed to Temple when Matt Rule was the coach there. And just the way Matt Rule has played offensive football going back to then, he always has, a pocket passing quarterback. Temple, Baylor, and then with the Panthers. So I'd say Willis 6. I think Corral's going in the teens somewhere. I think the team deployed to right now, maybe after that trade a couple days ago, would be the Saints. I think the Saints would be a really, really good fit for him. I've heard from multiple people that the Saints are absolutely looking for a rookie quarterback on the rookie contract for cap reasons. And obviously, Jameis Winston is no impediment to doing that. And then I think Kenny Pickett, whether it's in the teens or whether it's in the early 20s, I would assume he goes around there somewhere as well. And I think Desmond Ridder is the other name that we got to talk about in the first round.
Okay. Thor Nystrom, NBCSportsEdge.com. They're doing a great job with their draft coverage. And he walks you through the whole Matt Corral deal. Obviously, we've all watched him for the last 4 years, but especially the last 2 once Lane Train got there and his career took off. So when you debate Willis and Corral, is Corral more ready made early and you love Willis's upside and how you're projecting him? Where do you stand there?
I think that's fair. Yeah, I do think Corral can come in and do more things early on in a traditional NFL offense. We've seen him beat defenses with his arms now, in addition to his legs, but very specifically with his arm now for a couple of years. I'm not sure if I would start Matt Corral in week 1 just because of the offense he's coming out of, with the Lane Train, like you mentioned, sort of a limited read offense. And that's the one thing I would say that I want to see that he has to improve in is just going through the progression. Now, he has gotten better at that. You guys remember in 2020, there was a couple games there where he just started glitching, right? Like you had the Barry Odom game where Barry Odom drops 8 against Arkansas, the 6 interception game. The LSU game, he had 5 in that one, but it was in the downpour, and then they were coming back at the end. There was definitely circumstances there, but the Barry Odom game, that's what taught him, if they're going to drop 8 guys back there and just flood the back half of the field, we'll just steal yards and nick them all game. And I think that's what you saw a lot more of in 2021. Matt Corral did a much better job taking care of the ball, number 1, but not allowing mistakes to compound. And for that reason, that's how he locked himself into the top 2 quarterbacks, at least on my board.
And you wouldn't be surprised if a team gets nervous, like the Saints or someone else, and makes a little bit of a 3 to 4, slot jump and tries to grab Corral between 10 and 15, Thor?
I would almost expect it. The Saints have gotten into this position so soon before the draft because they're targeting, I would assume, a specific position, right? Like you usually don't see the draft picks for draft pick trades that far in front of the draft unless it's for a very specific target. Generally, it's a quarterback target, right? Like, the Eagles a couple of years ago for Wentz, or last year the 49ers going up for Lance. It's generally with a specific target, and in this case, there's been whispers about this that trade was made to set up the next one. That they know that the guy that they want isn't going to fall to them in the teens, but now you got some real ammo in this draft to go and move up. Whether that's how far do we got to get up? If Malik Willis is their guy, they probably have to get to 5. If Corral's their guy, I think being somewhere in the earlier teens would probably lock them into that now that Washington's off the board because Washington got Wentz.
Okay. And as we get closer, we're visiting with Thor Nystrom, NBCSportsEdge.com, NFL Draft Insider. As we get closer, a lot of times, all of them, Willis, Corral, and Pickett, and you mentioned Ritter, but their value is driven, even more up, and teams covet them even more as we're jockeying, figuring out what's going on. So would you be shocked if all 3 are taken in the top 15?
Not shocked. No, I wouldn't be. I could, because the scenario that facilitates that is if 2 go in the top 10. So the question becomes, can 2 go in the top 10? Because I think if that happens, there's going to be a sort of panic of the other teams there. We're thinking they were going to get a quarterback in the first round in terms of having to move up. So I think that's the scenario where you would see 3 in the top 15. And is it possible? Absolutely. I mean, one of the obvious ways would be if Detroit takes Willis at 2 and then at 6, Carolina pops a quarterback. I think at that point it would become the odds-on favorite outcome for 3 to go in the top 15.
And are you expecting a lot of moving around in the top 15 to 20 on Thursday night, Thor?
Man, after the offseason that we've had, you'd be almost foolish not to. We've seen an unprecedented, stringing together of procession of these just blockbuster trades with the NFL. I think more of the first round has already been overturned than in any of these recent analogous years. So, I would expect the trades to keep coming fast and furious on draft night as well, draft weekend.
Let's talk about what people believe is the number 1 pick, Aiden Hutchinson out of Michigan, edge rusher to the Jaguars. Why is he bona fide number 1? I mean, why is it, this is – because I get that he's talented and a really good player, but there also seems to be a lot of question marks, yet this is what, it's locked in, it's a done deal. Do you agree with all the hype around him? Are you questioning why he should be a done deal number 1 pick? Your thoughts on Aiden Hutchinson, edge rusher out of Michigan?
I would say that since Jacksonville sort of locked itself out of taking an offensive lineman by franchising Cam Robinson and then by signing Brandon Scherf, which essentially locked Juwan Taylor in a right tackle. So, you've taken all these different positions off the board. I think that's why it makes sense. I definitely think it makes sense to rank Hutchinson as edge 1 in what is a very strong edge class. Like he tested historically well as far as his size adjusted athletic composite. He's coming off a historic season for Michigan when they did their run to the college football playoff. He was a Heisman finalist, deservedly so. And then the motor is just ridiculous. So that there's nothing athletically he can't do in the NFL, and he's going to get every single ounce out of he's going to get as close to the ceiling as he possibly can. So I definitely get it. And the other thing that's good about him is he's known as a good locker room guy, like a character guy. And coming out of that Urban Meyer fiasco, personality-wise, that's probably the kind of kid you're looking for when you're turning the page.
Okay. Thor Nystrom on the Out of Bounds show and the Corona Premier Guest Line. talking NFL draft, we expect both Matt Corral and Charles Cross, obviously, to go in the first round. Blake and I will be out in Las Vegas. Haven't been to a draft yet. Really, really looking forward to it. Give me a team, a team maybe that we're not talking about that may try to make a run, make a move. You just mentioned the Saints, and obviously we're 2.5 hours from New Orleans and have crazy Saints fans around here. But give me another team that may make a move and try to move up for either Willis or Corral, Thor.
I know one that's going to try. I don't know if they got the ammo to get up there, but the Pittsburgh Steelers are absolutely going to try. You know, this has been one of the worst kept secrets, like, of the draft process. I know that they love Malik Willis. He's not the only quarterback in this class that they like. And so there might be more than one guy that they would move up for. But at least for Malik, I know he's, you know, that would be their target. But if he goes early, because they're not gonna be able to get up to one, you know, if he goes to the Lions, it's gonna lock him out. Might even lock him out if he goes to the Panthers. But I know that the Steelers are absolutely gonna try. We just saw the releasing of their official 30 visits. You know, you get to, 30 prospects into the building. It was funny because Pittsburgh's list had like 8 or 9 of the names were quarterbacks. They are taking a quarterback almost assuredly in the first round, unless there's just some nightmare scenario ahead of them, and they absolutely are going to make offers to move up. It's just, are they going to find a taker above them?
All right, so let's say Willis goes 2 or 6, or somewhere in there, top 5, top 6. As soon as that happens, Thor, and everybody's watching the draft and having a beverage and what does that do for Corral and Pickett's value, and maybe even Ritter's, as soon as the first one goes?
Well, say you're Matt Corral, right? Of course you want to be quarterback 1, but if you're not, the next best thing that you're rooting for is the quarterbacks to go as soon as they can. So let's say it's going to be Malik Willis. You're praying at 2 that Detroit's going to take Malik Willis because, that's when you move up to the top of the board at the NFL, by far the most valuable position in the NFL. And, I don't know how many teams at the top of their board Corral's QB1, but he's in the top 3 on a whole lot of boards. And if one of these happens to be, one of these teams that's in range there, I think that's where you could see Matt Corral go a little bit higher than people have talked to at this point in this process. And, the chatter around Corral, he'd have a lot more talk around him if he'd just gone through the full draft process. But, the kid was a warrior. He played out his season, suffered the injury, and so it's been a little bit late of a start for him against some of these other guys that we've seen throw. So the media has talked more about him. But Matt Corral's a legit prospect. The NFL knows it.
And he may close the gap. I mean, he may be the guy that has more juice the next 3 weeks than the other 2 that we've been talking about, Thor, because of what you just described. You never know.
I think, in fact, I may or may not have a ticket from a sports book from a month or 2 ago about Matt Corral to be QB1, because the odds on that stuff were badly off in the markets because Matt Corral's pre-draft process had started late.
Love it. Okay, let's switch gears. Charles Cross, left tackle, Mississippi State. We know all about him because we've been following him since his high school career. But he really showed up and showed out this past year, and people believe his best football's in front of him. Where do you see Charles Cross going?
He's definitely a top 15 pick. He's going to go somewhere in the top half of the first round. For him, it sort of becomes the opposite kind of equation that we're talking about. Like with Corral, for instance, with Charles Cross, you're hoping that whether I'm wrong that the Jaguars take an offensive lineman, or I don't think the Lions will, because they got Sewell and they got that, they're paying Decker a whole bunch of money across from him. But if not, then the Texans, right? Because the more teams at the top, the very, very top, the Jets, the Giants, the more of those teams that take offensive linemen, ideally for Cross, 2 of the top 5 teams would end up taking an offensive lineman, or 2 of the top 6, however you go. Because then that's when Cross goes to the top of the board. I don't think he's getting above Ike Ekwonu or Evan Neal. But I think the second the 2 of those guys are off the board, all of a sudden it's Charles Cross time. He won't be in the green room for long after that.
Okay. Thor Nystrom on the Out of Bounds Show and the Corona Premier Guest Line, NBCSportsEdge.com. And we're excited Corral and Cross will be drafted in the first round. Do you have who's your sleeper guy in the top 15 or so, Thor, where you're like, okay, there's just only so much bandwidth after you start talking about Aiden Hutchinson and the quarterbacks and a couple other guys. Who's your sleeper guy that you're like, this guy is so talented, but he's just not going to get a lot of pub, but he's going to be really good for someone?
I'd say Chris Olave. You know, like this receiver class, every time Chris Olave never gets talked about. And it's the craziest dang thing. This is a kid who the last 3 years was clearly the best receiver on the Ohio State roster when they didn't just have Garrett Wilson, fellow first-rounder Garrett Wilson. They also had wide receiver one for next year, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Promise you he's going to be wide receiver one. And they also had Jamison Williams on those teams. Jamison Williams had to transfer to Tuscaloosa, Alabama in order to get targets. And a lot of that was because of Chris Olave. He wasn't getting past Chris Olave on the depth chart. And all 3 of those years, Chris Olave was the guy. You know, and then Wilson got better, you know, as far as the complimentary. And then Jackson Smith and Jigba, of course, took off. But I just think he's a really underrated player. People focus on the nitpicking, the one thing he can't control, which is, you know, the size thing, the play strength thing. But on every single other metric, he's awesome and almost unparalleled in this class, both statistically and on tape. He's a guy who he creates separation in his routes like the rest of us breathe. Like it's just something natural for him as a matter of course.
Okay, Chris Olave, Ohio State wide receiver for our listeners, and filthy talented. Can my Dallas Cowboys do anything to get him, or will he be long, long gone, Thor?
I think that there's a shot, and I think that would be a great fit. You know, just because of the depth of this wide receiver class, and you know, part of that thing I was talking about like Olave's he's been the top guy for so long that there was this nitpicking that started, and now some of these receivers are passing them, and I definitely understand. Like, I love Drake London, for instance, or Jamison Williams. I think absolutely would have had a very real shot to be wide receiver one, if not for the ACL. And I still love Jamison Williams, but because of that stuff, and because the projection is that Garrett Wilson will also go above him. I don't agree with that, but that's the projection. That's the thing that could push Olave, and I think probably will, at least to the late teens, and very well could push him into the 20s. But at the very least, it would open up and facilitate the possibility of a trade up for a team like Dallas.
Okay. So if Olave is gone and the Dallas Cowboys are still locked in and they want to get a wide, let's say they want to go wide receiver, period, who do you think that could be outside of Olave?
I think Jamison Williams would be a possibility, depending on the way that the NFL comes out seeing his medicals. Because I obviously I don't have any more information about that than anyone else does. I haven't seen his medicals. That's going to be an individual team decision. But he absolutely could fall there because of that. And he would. I mean, if it's me, I'm running the card in at that point because of the talent he is. If I need a wide receiver, if Jamison Williams needs to be out the first couple of weeks, I'm fine with that. And he might be on the field. I mean, we saw the videos of him moving around super good. He didn't get to work out at Alabama's Pro Day, but they had video of him, doing shuffles and sort of calisthenics on the field. And I was like, man, that is a guy that's moving around very well for just coming off the ACL tear. And then as far as one sleeper guy for the 20s to keep in the back of your head, I think Christian Watson, at the end of the day, from NDSU, I think he ends up cracking the first round, and it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up going in the 20s. And people should not view it as a stunner or even a mistake. That kid has first round NFL ability all day.
I got about a minute. Let's wrap it up with this. Thor Nystrom on the Corona Premier Guest Line. Nakobe Dean is from Mississippi, had a great career at Georgia. Where do you see Nakobe Dean going?
The off-ball linebacker thing is so hard because it's sort of like in some ways it's analogous to running backs. It's not quite as depreciated, but it's getting there because the NFL teams are in nickel so much that most of the time there's two off-ball linebackers on the field for a given NFL team. So that's why there's a value depreciation there. But he's a fabulous player. I mean, just absolutely chef's kiss fabulous. I mean, just so active and physical and reliable over all those years. And by the way, I think there's more utility out of his game than we've seen. As you know, Georgia didn't blitz their linebackers certainly as much as they could have. They were pretty conservative with that. Nakobe Dean, as far as his pressure percentage per snap, was, I believe, above Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeau. Now it's, I mean, we're talking a smaller sample size. Channing Tindall is another example of this, a guy who was an awesome blitzer, just didn't get to do it as much. But I think in the NFL, you're going to see Nakobe Dean unleashed a little bit more as a blitzer as well. We already know he can cover as well. He's a kid that can do everything.
Love it. That was fun. Thor Nystrom, NBCSportsEdge.com, NFL Draft Insider on Corral, Cross, and some of the other guys that will be going in the first round. Can't wait. Thursday night, Las Vegas in a few weeks. It's going to be a blast. Hey, Thor, great job. We appreciate it. We'll catch up again soon.
Always good talking to you.
Thor Nystrom on the Out of Bounds Show. ESPN 105.9 The Zone, brought to you by the Ram Trucks, Jeep Wranglers, and Jeep Cherokees at Mack Hike in Flowood. Visit MackHikeFlowood.com. Also, the show is brought to you by Went McGee, the Mortgage Man, MortgageManMS.com. He'll shop the best rates for you. And guess what? Mudbugs opens today. That's where you can grab a sack of crawfish and enjoy yourself with the Corona premiere. We'll see you tomorrow.